I want to let you know that I have a Patreon again, and offers the largest number of benefits, I think, for any Nat History channel. If you can afford it, there's a link in the description, the comment section, and at the end of this video. Thanks a bunch. Madagascar is home to many animal lineages which enjoyed greater global diversity thousands of years ago. Pygmy hippopotamus, dwarf chameleons, and of course the lemurs are all examples of old genetic pools thrown into an isolated environment and given unfettered access to adapt and evolve into crazy forms. Madagascar has been this way before humans and the mastodon. Madagascar has been a land of the lost for 88 million years. The dinosaurian fauna, which had colonized this piece of continental crust before it separated from India and the Seychelles, were commonplace throughout much of the southern continents. Ceratosaurs and allosaurs were everywhere, and so were croc relatives, sauropods, stegosaurs, and their ilk. Once Madagascar split away from the other continents, it molded the genes of its biological hitchhikers into quite bizarre forms found nowhere else. Abelisaurs became short-legged and extremely elongate. Frogs engorged to record sizes. The titanic sauropod shrunk. A group of hornless tiny-armed ceratosaurs brandished mouths of Swiss Army knife teeth. And croc derivatives took to colonizing the land in every way they could. In no genus is this separation from the norm of the mainland continents more prevalent than the tiny, pudgy, short-skulled Simosuchus. There is a common misconception that crocs are living fossils. The whole concept of the living fossil is a misconception as well, for each thing we call a living fossil actually has changed over time. It's only that their general body plan is so successful and generalized to adapting in many environments that they have not drifted away from it too heavily. Crocs are not living fossils. The ones alive today are rather different. Drastic differences exist mostly between the skulls of modern species, but more subtle differences exist in their limb lengths, color, amount of osteoderms, and much more. They all derive from an ancestor which was also rather croc-like, and was an amphibious, short-limbed tail swisher. They've never needed to drastically remodel their entire genome to produce a completely different body form. This cannot be said for the cousins of the modern crocs. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Discovery. 1993 saw the release of many of you's favorite film. But on the topic of Simosuchus, this year also saw initiation of a collaborative project between the Stony Brook University of New York and the University of Antananarivo in Madagascar. This project was called the Mahajango Basin Project, and was tasked with broadening the scope of known Mesozoic fauna of Madagascar. The first specimen, called a holotype of Simosuchus, was uncovered during this project. The remains were described in 2000. What they had to work with was quite a neat specimen. Cut in half, the front end of this creature presented a mass pile of hard, bony osteoderms, and the bones which made up the skull, arms, shoulders, and chest. 3 more specimens of different conditions were found later, and described in 2010. Now totaling 4 specimens, nearly the entire skeleton is known. This was a very weird creature. Putting the puzzle back together. Biology. Based on available specimens, Simosuchus is estimated to have reached around 3 feet or 1 meter in length. As it is small but hefty, it may have also weighed in around 25 to 50 pounds, depending on size and age. One of the most obvious features of Simosuchus is its skull. This animal had a shovel-shaped, blunt-edged, deep skull, unlike all modern crocs. This is why it got its name, which means Pug Croc in Latin. This skull is bizarre for a bunch of other reasons too. As you can see, the teeth are quite unusual for a croc. Here's a diagram showing a 2-dimensional representation of the curved tooth row. The teeth at the front of the jaws are similarly leaf or clover-shaped in both lower and upper jaws. These are the type of teeth you usually find in between the lips of herbivorous animals. The 2000 description of the first specimen compared Simosuchus teeth to modern herbivorous iguanian lizards, as well as extinct animals which have been inferred to be herbivorous, including ornithischian dinosaurs, a pariasaur reptile, and a fish. That basically settles a generalized hypothesis that these teeth were used for eating plants. This little croc was predominantly an herbivore. The teeth at the very front of the jaw, a bone called the premaxilla, have a crown in the center which is taller than the rest, with two side crowns creating a three-pronged maple leaf-style tooth. Teeth in the rest of the jaw become more uniform. The spiky crowns become the same length and are attached to a horizontal pillar or bar. This tooth was probably equivalent to a processing tooth, or a molar. Since the teeth don't go all the way back to the end of the jaws, this might mean it was not a super specialized herbivore. No big molars all the way in the back of the mouth means it was not chewing things up into pulp for efficient digestion. The sauropod dinosaurs used this technique. They had needle-shaped teeth only at the very front of their mouths, and they used them to strip branches of their foliage before swallowing them whole. Unlike the sauropods, Simosuchus has teeth that do go past the very front of the jaws, just not to the extent of mammals. This means it was more than just occasionally eating plants. The top entree on its menu was probably salad. Perhaps it supplemented this with some insects or small animals every now and then, as it wasn't super adapted to greenery yet. More recent relatives may be found even more adapted to consuming plants. A big difference between dino skulls and croc skulls is texture. Croc skulls have rough textures creating a complex canvas of cracks on the face. Dino skulls are mostly smooth. Most have holes called foramina, which originally housed blood vessels and nerves, supplying the face with blood, nutrition, and a sensitivity to touch or vibrations. As though a combination of dino and croc features, the Simosuchus skull has a lot of sculpted rugose cracks like a croc, but they are completely absent on the jaw bones. The jaws are rather smooth and pockmarked, with a handful of foramina holes. According to Dr. Mark Whitten and Dr. Ashley Morhart, there are a few characteristics within the face bones of animals which may indicate presence of extraoral tissues. Extraoral tissues cover a wide variety of structures, anything from the intricately muscled lips of mammals to the tight seal of a lizard. The size, amount, and placement of foramina within the jaws, as well as the texture of the outside of the bone itself, are all factors. The less holes there are, and the smoother the bone, the more likely it is for there to be extraoral tissues present. This is evident in crocs, which have extremely rugose skulls and hundreds of holes throughout the skull. They have next to no extraoral tissues or lips. I'm going out on a limb here and speculating Simosuchus may have had extraoral tissues too. The top side of the skull is extremely rugose, like most crocs, but it's the premaxillae, maxillae, and the upper portion of the lower jaw which are much smoother than the rugose parts of the skull. Look at this part of the jaws. There are a good 10 to 15 visible holes pockmarking the bone. These holes are present in both the upper jaws and the lower jaws. This is what Simosuchus may have looked like if it indeed had extraoral tissue, creating a watertight seal over the mouth. These lips are not the lips of a mammal nor a lizard, something altogether different. They serve to hold in moisture, to protect from abrasion, and to hold food within the mouth. The head is not the only weird part of this animal. The head of Simosuchus attaches to its body in an unusual manner. The connection of the skull to the vertebrae was oriented at a 30 or 40 degree angle downwards. This means the critter's neck attached to the skull from the bottom and not from the back. The head was likely held slightly downwards but mostly vertical. The neck bones suggest it would have had rather large neck and shoulder muscles. The blades of bone sticking out of the vertebrae made the neck more rigid than other crocs. These bones were large enough to hold a lot of muscle. These muscles and the shape of the head suggested to the guys who first described the holotype back in 2000 that it may have been a burrower. They reasoned the shovel-shaped skull, how compact it was, and the angle at which it was held coupled with the relatively short legs, robust body, and rigidity of the spine, meant it was more adapted to shovel with its head and torso than to scrape burrows with its claws. Believe it or not, modern crocs are great burrowers. They will often carve out a cozy little burrow to escape extreme heat or long periods of drought. Since these crocs are not specialized to a burrowing lifestyle, they don't have any anatomical adaptations for this. The croc does as a croc do, and uses its claws, feet, and snout to move dirt. This means pretty much any croc can burrow, even if they don't have specializations to do so. They just don't do it all the time. When all 4 Simosuchus specimens were analyzed in 2010, the researchers found Simosuchus was not super specifically adapted to a burrowing lifestyle. It obviously had some adaptations which would have made it better at burrowing than modern crocs. It may have done this more often than modern crocs, but still lived on the surface much of the time. To that point, Simosuchus also had relatively short legs. Though they still retained some length similar to its relatives, they were definitely evolving into a shorter, more robust state. Aside from the weird head and the overall shortness of the animal, the next really big thing which has been screaming at me this whole time is the suit of armor. Simosuchus looks like an angry pine cone. Compiling all of the data from all 4 specimens, it's extremely clear this croc was covered from head to toe in a heavy bodysuit of bone armor called osteoderms. Osteoderms are small pieces of bone which rest within the skin. They act as armor and are usually covered by a molded sheath of keratin sticking out of the skin. This body armor shielded the top and bottom of the tail, the belly, the back, the neck, the outside of the thigh, calf, upper arm, and bicep. Armor is concentrated in these regions, in a way similar to the protective equipment used when skating or kneeling. These shells were loosely locked together to allow some form of flexibility, but overall restricted the animal's movements. The vertebral spines, and those spines which latch vertebrae together along the spinal column, are very long and strongly interlocked. These locked spines, together with the rigid body armor, worked to essentially harden Simosuchus so it couldn't easily flex its body side to side as easily as aquatic or semi-aquatic crocs. Crocs which need to spend a lot of time in the water also need to easily flex their bodies side to side in tight serpentine arcs to swim better. This fits in with how tight their tails need to be to switch back and forth to propel themselves through water. Just one more thing setting little Simosuchus apart from modern crocs is its tail. It's very short, composed of less than 20 vertebrae. The tail vertebrae are locked together and encased in a section of osteoderm armor, creating an almost pinecone or candy corn shaped stubby tail. It did not need a long flat tail like a modern crocodile because it probably wasn't one for taking a dip in the streams of Madagascar. If the suit of armor of Simosuchus and the bones in its spine all work together to keep the animal's body stiff and unable to flex, this must mean it was mostly, if not completely terrestrial. The shorter, more robust legs, herbivorous teeth, possible lippage, and the short, stubby tail pretty much rule out any interpretation which involves the animal spending a lot of time by the water. Taking a trip down memory lane. Phylogeny. Most researchers who studied Simosuchus consider it a part of the clade called Notasuchia. Notasuchia are not directly related to modern crocs, which are part of the clade Crocodilia. This would make Simosuchus technically not a croc, but I'm using the common term croc to refer to it, so we're all good. The group which led to modern crocs is called Metasuchia. It's divided into Notasuchia and Neosuchia. Metasuchia is a very big group and holds a lot of different animals. They share the same crocodile aesthetics with rugose bones, osteoderms, and 4 legs ending in 4 or 5 toes. Neosuchia gave rise to a bunch of crocodile-like animals which developed the stereotypical crocodile body shape. Eventually, this group also developed into Crocodilia, which is the clade containing all living crocs. The sister group, Notasuchia, took a very different route. Instead of turning to the water's edge, or the oceans, the Notasuchians relinquished their water-loving ways and developed near or full terrestriality. Long legs held directly under the body like a dinosaur or mammal, blunt claws used for grasping the ground, and shorter, robust snouts for grasping land prey or land plants all helped them succeed among the dinosaurs of South America, Africa, and parts of Europe. Simosuchus is a Notosuchian according to the most recent research done by Joe Sertic and Alan Turner. Their tests figured Simosuchus as the closest relative to Libycosuchus of Egypt. The presence of Simosuchus in Madagascar is proof these types of crocs came to Madagascar through Africa after they had dispersed in South America. It's hard to make a living. Environment. All Simosuchus remains were uncovered from the Maverano Formation. An exact time on this layer is tricky. No one has done a radiometric date test on it. It has been estimated to be of late Cretaceous age, and there are a few pieces of evidence that makes this estimation more than just guesswork. The rocks at the top of this layer preserve a magnetic reversal. That is, the rocks at the top of this formation preserve metals oriented in a direction different from magnetic poles of today. This means the poles shifted from a position before this layer existed to the time this layer was laid down. The closest reversal to the late Cretaceous time frame estimated for the Maverano Formation is one that occurred 65.8 million years ago. This means the top of this layer of rock has to be, at most, 65.8 million years old. This makes the layer below it tentatively of Maastrichtian age. This time frame saw the KT mass extinction at 66 million years ago, and this means all of the fauna preserved in the Maverano Formation were also present at the end of the age of the dinosaurs, which places Simosuchus at the tail end of the Mesozoic. What was Madagascar like at this time? The rocks give us our answer. The rocks preserve evidence of parched dryland soils in the form of coarse-grained sandstones and dunes, as well as impressions where roots used to be and calcium carbonate residues, which were left when water dried up. Seasonal flooding occurred throughout the many thousands or millions of years of this layer of rock. Fine-grained sand deposits were also found, but with less frequency, which means water carried the tiny grains of sand through the region only occasionally, which is consistent with seasonal flooding. The paleomagnetic data also suggests Madagascar was located in a more northerly position as it was drifting towards the equator. All of this tells us this place was a bit drier than it is today, saw monsoons during part of the year, and probably had widely spaced forests intermixed with more open, sandier areas. In this environment, it is probable to think Simosuchus utilized its heavily reinforced anatomy to push and claw itself a snug burrow to escape the dry season. Perhaps, like modern crocs, it hibernated or estivated for a period of time. Unlike modern crocs, it may have made its burrow a more permanent hideout from predators, like the tiny-legged, tiny-armed, sausage-shaped Majungasaurus, which prowled the forests. Machikosaurus, the zipper-mouthed, noasaurid theropod, was also present in this ecosystem. It was large enough to present a threat to the Pug Croc, but its armor was probably too thick for the theropod to bite through. It's possible Simosuchus also adapted such strong rigid armor as an anti-predator defense. Not even the underside was unarmored. Closer in size to Simosuchus was Beelzebufo, the largest frog to ever live. This giant, distant relative to today's horned frogs may have grown to 16 inches, 10 centimeters. Though I seriously doubt it could fit Simosuchus in its mouth, that wouldn't have stopped it from trying if modern frogs are anything to go by. Sauropods, like Rapidosaurus, were the largest terrestrial animals on the island continent, and presented a clear hazard for a Simosuchus if it got caught underfoot. Simosuchus is the first and only example of a croc which dined almost exclusively on veg. Why is this? No one knows for sure. There was something about the ecosystems of Cretaceous Madagascar which allowed for another small-bodied herbivore to thrive. There's a distinct lack of other herbivore lineages so far uncovered from the rocks of Madagascar. There may be evidence of a stegosaur, but overall, no ceratopsians, therizinosaurs, oviraptorosaurs, or ornithopods. A newly described mammal, Adalatherium, was roughly the same size and similar in shape to Simosuchus. A rotund, barrel-bodied Gondwanatherian mammal with a skull packed with teeth meant for shearing through vegetation. Might this mean Madagascar was even more of a lost world of bizarre beasts than could ever be imagined? Guess we'll have to wait and see. Maybe you'll be the next volunteer or intern to go with the Denver Museum crew to the dry forests of Madagascar to help uncover more mysteries. Let me know in the comments below what other Madagascan creatures you want me to cover. Give this video a like and subscribe to my channel if you think I deserve it. Make sure you slam the notification bell as well, just so you're in the know with everything Edge. Thanks for watching.
Next level.